I never imagined that my love story would end in betrayal. Ethan and I had been together for 6 years, married for 3, and I truly believed we had something real. When we met in college, he was just a broke student with big dreams. I was his biggest supporter, always standing by his side, cheering for him, helping him whenever he struggled. I never minded that I was the one paying for most of our dates, covering some of his bills, or even helping him land his first job after graduation. Love, I thought, was about partnership. But I was wrong. The day he left, he could barely look at me. "I'm sorry, Claire," he said, his voice void of emotion. "I didn't plan for this to happen, but I need to be with someone who matches my ambitions." Matches his ambitions? That someone was Helena Carter, a billionaire heiress to a luxury hotel empire. She had the wealth, the connections, the prestige. She was the kind of woman who lived in penthouses, traveled by private jet, and never had to worry about something as mundane as a credit card limit. I was nothing compared to her, or so Ethan believed. He packed his bags that evening and left our shared apartment without looking back. I sat there staring at the door long after he had gone, feeling my entire world shatter around me. I had given this man my love, my loyalty, my everything. And in return, he had discarded me like an old, worn-out coat. What Ethan never realized was that I was not just some ordinary woman. My father, Richard Davenport, was one of the wealthiest businessmen in the country. He owned multiple companies. His name carried weight in the corporate world, and our family fortune far surpassed Helena Carter's. But I had never flaunted my wealth. I had wanted someone to love me for me, not for my last name or my inheritance. I had hidden my background from Ethan, choosing to live a simple life, away from the pressures of my family's name. I wanted to build something for myself, to succeed on my own terms, and I had thought Ethan was the kind of man who would love me regardless of what I had or didn't have. Clearly, I had misjudged him. For the first few weeks, I was broken. I could barely eat, barely sleep. The betrayal consumed me. But then something inside me shifted. I realized that I was not some abandoned, helpless woman. I was Claire Davenport. And I would make sure Ethan regretted every decision he had made. I packed up my things and moved out of the tiny apartment we had shared. I returned to my family's estate, a breathtaking mansion overlooking the city. My father, who had always respected my desire for independence, welcomed me back with open arms. He had never liked Ethan, but he had let me make my own choices. Now it was time for me to reclaim my place in the world. I joined Davenport Enterprises, taking a leadership role in one of my father's fastest-growing subsidiaries. My name started appearing in business magazines, my face on the covers of elite publications. I attended galas, networked with powerful people, and proved that I was more than just an heiress. I was a force to be reckoned with. It didn't take long for my transformation to catch Ethan's attention. The first time I saw him again was at a high-profile charity event. I was wearing a designer gown surrounded by CEOs and influential figures, and there he was, standing next to Helena, looking as smug as ever. But the moment his eyes landed on me, I saw the change in his expression. Confusion, shock, maybe even a hint of regret. I gave him a polite nod, as if he were just another insignificant face in the crowd, and turned away. Over the following months, I heard rumors. Ethan and Helena weren't as happy as they pretended to be. She controlled him, dictated where he could go, what he could do. She wasn't the loving, supportive partner he had once had in me. Then came the biggest blow. Helena's father, realizing that Ethan was nothing more than a gold digger, cut him off financially. Suddenly, the life he had so desperately wanted was slipping through his fingers. One evening, after a major business conference, I walked out of the venue to find Ethan waiting for me near my car. "Claire," he said, his voice softer, more hesitant than I had ever heard it. "Can we talk?" I looked at him, really looked at him. He seemed thinner, stressed. Not the confident, arrogant man who had left me for someone richer. "Why?" I asked coolly. "Because I made a mistake," he admitted. "I was blinded by the idea of something better. But it wasn't real. You were real, Claire. And I threw it away." I crossed my arms, tilting my head slightly. "So let me get this straight. You left me because I wasn't rich enough. And now that you know who my family is, you suddenly want me back." He flinched. "No, it's not like that." I let out a soft laugh. Oh, Ethan, it's exactly like that. He reached for my hand, desperation in his eyes. Please, Claire. Just give me a chance to fix this. I know I don't deserve it, but. I stepped back. You're right. You don't. For a moment he just stood there, his face pale. You really won't even consider it? I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Ethan, let me make one thing perfectly clear. I was never the problem. You were. You wanted money and power, and now you see what you lost. But you lost it forever. And with that I turned away, stepping into my luxury car and driving off, leaving him standing there, alone with nothing. Life only got better from there. I built my own empire, forged my own path, and eventually I found love again with a man who valued me for who I was, not what I had. Ethan? He faded into obscurity. A cautionary tale of what happens when greed overpowers love. Some choices in life cannot be undone. He learned that the hard way. Months passed and I barely thought about Ethan anymore. Life had taken me in a completely different direction. One that I never would have experienced if he hadn't left me. I had thrown myself into my career, and for the first time I truly felt like I was fulfilling my potential. But life has a way of bringing back ghosts from the past. One evening I was attending a business summit in London. It was an exclusive event, reserved for top executives, investors, and world leaders. I was mingling with some of the biggest names in the industry when I heard a voice I hadn't expected to hear again. Claire. I turned around and there he was. Ethan. But he was different now. He looked tired. Worn out. His once perfectly styled hair was slightly disheveled, and the confident glint in his eyes had been replaced with something I could only describe as desperation. For a moment I debated pretending not to know him, but I was curious. Ethan, I greeted, my tone polite but distant. What are you doing here? He swallowed hard. I work for one of the smaller firms attending the summit. I didn't expect to see you here. I raised an eyebrow. Didn't expect to see me? Ethan, I run one of the fastest growing companies in the industry now. My name is literally on the guest list. A flicker of something crossed his face. Shame, maybe? Embarrassment? He shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing just how much had changed since we last spoke. Right, he muttered. I guess I haven't really kept up with everything. I smiled, sipping my champagne. Oh, I know you have. His face reddened. He knew I had caught him in a lie. After our last encounter, I had heard from mutual acquaintances that Ethan had been keeping tabs on me, watching my success unfold from the sidelines. And now, here he was standing before me, no longer the man who had thought he was too good for me. So, I said casually, how's Helena? He stiffened. We're not together anymore. I tilted my head. Oh. He exhaled sharply. She dumped me a few months after her father cut me off. Said she didn't sign up for a struggling man. I almost laughed. How ironic. He had left me for someone wealthier, only to end up exactly where he had feared, struggling. That's unfortunate, I said, though there was no real sympathy in my voice. Ethan looked at me, his expression raw. Claire, I know I have no right to ask for anything from you, but I miss you. I miss what we had. And I know I screwed up, but if you could just. I held up a hand. Ethan stopped. He shut his mouth immediately. I sighed, shaking my head. What exactly do you think is going to happen here? That I'll take you back? That we'll just forget the way you walked out on me, and pretend like none of it happened? He swallowed. I just thought maybe. You thought wrong. I placed my empty glass on a passing server's tray and turned to face him fully. Ethan, you made your choice. You wanted someone with more money, more power. And you got exactly what you deserved. I don't hate you for it, but I will never let you be part of my life again. His eyes were pleading. Claire, I was stupid. I was selfish. But you and I had something real. Can't we at least? No. The finality in my voice made him flinch. I gave him one last look, then turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, alone, lost, and full of regret. This time I knew for sure. I had won, and he had lost. As I walked away from Ethan, I felt an overwhelming sense of closure. For years I had wondered if he would ever regret his decision, if he would ever see me for who I truly was. Now I had my answer. He did regret it, but it didn't matter anymore. I had moved on. Or so I thought. A week after the summit, I received an unexpected email. It was from Ethan. Subject: One last chance. Claire, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. I don't blame you. But please, if you can find it in your heart to meet me one last time, I would really appreciate it. No expectations, no pressure. Just one conversation. If you don't want to, I understand. I'll be at Le Jardin at 7 p.m. on Friday. If you don't show up, I won't bother you again. Ethan. I stared at the email for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to delete it and move on. But another part of me was curious. What could he possibly have left to say? When Friday arrived, I found myself standing outside Le Jardin, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. I had no idea why I was here. Maybe I just wanted to see how much lower he had fallen. Or maybe deep down I needed to hear his explanation. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. Ethan was already there, sitting at a corner table. He looked nervous, like he wasn't sure if I would actually come. When he saw me, he stood up immediately. "Claire," he breathed, relief flashing in his eyes. "You came." I sat down, keeping my expression unreadable. "Make it quick." He swallowed. I wanted to tell you everything. The truth. No excuses, no lies." I folded my arms. "I'm listening." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "When I left you for Helena, I thought I was making the right choice. I thought that being with her would give me the life I always dreamed of. But it was never real. The moment things got hard, she threw me away like I was nothing. And for the first time I realized that's what I did to you. I didn't say anything. I just let him talk. I was greedy, selfish, and I thought that having money and power was all that mattered. But when I saw you again at that gala, I realized I had been blind. You were always the strong one, Claire. You had everything I wanted, but you never let it define you. I was too stupid to see it back then." I tilted my head. "And now that you've lost everything, you suddenly see my value?" He winced. "I know how it sounds. And I know I don't deserve anything from you. But I needed to say it. I needed you to know that I was wrong." I watched him for a long moment. He did seem genuine. But it didn't change anything. "You were wrong," I agreed. "But it doesn't change what happened." "I know," he whispered. For the first time I saw real pain in his eyes. He wasn't trying to manipulate me. He wasn't trying to win me back. He was just broken. And that was enough for me. I stood up. "Goodbye, Ethan." He didn't try to stop me this time. He simply nodded, accepting his fate. As I walked out of the restaurant, I felt lighter than I had in years. The past was finally behind me. And the future? It was mine to conquer. The true end was just the beginning. As I walked out of Le Jardin, I felt an odd sense of peace. Closure. The chapter with Ethan was finally over. He had made his choices and he had to live with them. I had no hatred left, only indifference. But life has a strange way of weaving people back together in the most unexpected ways. 2 months later, I was in Paris for a major business expansion deal. Davenport Enterprises was negotiating the acquisition of a luxury tech startup, and I was leading the talks. The company's CEO, Alexander Laurent, was brilliant, ambitious, and devastatingly handsome. We met over long negotiation tables, where his sharp mind kept me on my toes. But outside the boardroom, he was charming, effortlessly sophisticated, and had a quiet intensity that intrigued me. One evening, after a particularly long discussion, he invited me for dinner. "Not as competitors," he said with a smirk, "but as two people who enjoy good food and intelligent conversation." I accepted. That night, under the glow of the Eiffel Tower, I found myself laughing in a way I hadn't in years. Alexander didn't see me as an heiress, nor did he view me as a stepping stone for his own ambitions. He saw me, and for the first time I felt truly seen. We spent the next few weeks in Paris wrapped in a whirlwind of business and stolen moments. And when the deal was finalized, I expected us to part ways. But Alexander had other plans. "I don't want this to end, Claire," he told me, his voice laced with sincerity. "Come back to Paris soon. Or let me come to you." For once I didn't hesitate. Meanwhile, Ethan was spiraling. I hadn't heard from him since our last meeting, but whispers of his downfall had reached me. He had lost his job, struggled to find stable work, and was drowning in debt. The same man who once prided himself on ambition was now aimless, lost in the consequences of his own greed. One day, I received a message from an unknown number. Ethan, Claire. I don't know who else to turn to. I need help. I stared at the screen, feeling nothing. No pity, no anger, just indifference. I didn't reply, because I had already moved on. Ethan had chosen his path, and I had chosen mine. And my path led to a future brighter than anything I could have imagined. As I stood on the balcony of my Parisian hotel, my phone buzzed with a message from Alexander. Alexander. Dinner tonight? I know a place you'll love. I smiled. I'll meet you there. This was my story now. And for the first time it was exactly the way it was meant to be. A future worth writing. Life had a strange way of proving that everything happened for a reason. If Ethan had never left me, I would have never rediscovered my own strength, never reclaimed my identity, and never met Alexander. Paris had become more than just a business trip. It had become a new chapter in my life. Alexander and I continued seeing each other, despite our busy schedules. Some weekends he would fly to New York, surprising me with dinner at exclusive rooftop restaurants. Other times I would return to Paris, where he would take me on late-night walks along the Seine, whispering secrets of the city's hidden corners. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was real. And for the first time in my life, love felt effortless. Meanwhile, Ethan's downfall was complete. One day, while leaving my office, I noticed the familiar figure standing near the entrance of Davenport Enterprises. My breath hitched for a moment before I composed myself. Ethan looked broken. His suit, once always pressed and pristine, was wrinkled and slightly too big on him. His eyes, which used to gleam with arrogance, were hollow. He saw me and straightened, as if trying to regain some of his former pride. Claire. I didn't stop walking. I have nothing to say to you, Ethan. Please, he begged, stepping closer. Just listen. I sighed and glanced at my watch. You have 2 minutes. He exhaled sharply. I lost everything. My job, my apartment. No one will hire me. And Helena. He let out a bitter laugh. She moved on like I never existed. I remained silent, waiting for him to get to his point. I was stupid, he admitted. Blinded by greed. I thought money would make me happy. But I lost the one person who actually cared about me. His voice cracked slightly. Claire. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need help. There it was. The real reason he was here. I crossed my arms. You need money. He had the decency to look ashamed. A job. A fresh start. Anything. For a brief second, the old me might have considered it. The girl who once loved him, who wanted to believe in second chances. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I met his eyes, my voice steady. Ethan, when you left me, you said you needed someone who matched your ambitions. But the truth is, you never had ambitions. You only wanted shortcuts to success. And now you're paying the price. He swallowed hard. I know. I'm not going to save you, I continued. Because you never would have done the same for me. Tears welled up in his eyes. Claire, please. I shook my head. Goodbye, Ethan. And with that I walked away, my heels clicking against the pavement. Each step a reminder that I had one. Not in revenge, not in wealth, but in self-respect. That night Alexander called. How was your day, mon amour? His deep voice asked through the phone. I smiled. Perfect. Because for the first time in a long time it truly was. Ethan was my past. Alexander was my future. And I was finally truly free. After leaving Ethan behind, my life became even more exciting and fulfilling. I expanded my business, traveled the world, closed deals that reshaped industries, and enjoyed every moment of it. But fate had one last joke to play on me. One evening, I attended an exclusive charity auction in London. The event was filled with influential figures from across the globe. Naturally, Alexander was by my side, my partner in life and business. And then I heard a name that should have been long forgotten. Lot number 17 is presented by Ethan Carter, former CFO of Carter Holdings. I barely held back a laugh. Ethan was selling off old stocks, probably the last valuable thing he had left. He looked worn out, his suit no longer designer, his face tired and aged beyond his years. When our eyes met I saw it: shame, regret, envy. Alexander leaned in, whispering in my ear. Who is that miserable man? I simply smiled. No one important. And with that, we turned back to our lives. Because the past was exactly where it belonged, behind me. The past never truly disappears. Just when I thought Ethan was nothing more than a forgotten chapter, life decided to test me again. It had been a year since that auction in London. I had nearly erased him from my memory, until I received a message from an unknown number. Unknown. Claire, I know I don't deserve your time, but please, I need to talk to you. It's important. I stared at my phone, debating whether to respond. Part of me was curious. What could possibly be so important? Another part of me knew I shouldn't care. Against my better judgment, I typed a reply. Me, you have 2 minutes. Unknown. Please meet me. Just once. It's not about me. It's about something you need to know. I hesitated. Was this another desperate attempt to manipulate me? To get back into my life? Before I could reply, another message came through. Unknown. It's about Alexander. My heart stopped. Me, what about him? Unknown. Meet me at the Regent Hotel tonight at 8 p.m. I'll explain everything. I clenched my jaw. Every instinct told me this was a bad idea. But if it involved Alexander, I needed to know. At exactly 8 p.m., I arrived at the Regent Hotel. The lobby was dimly lit, filled with hushed conversations and the clinking of expensive glasses. And there, in the corner, was Ethan. He looked even worse than before, like a man who had nothing left to lose. I sat down across from him, keeping my expression neutral. You said this was about Alexander. Speak. Ethan sighed. I know you don't trust me. You shouldn't. But I found something out. Something you need to hear. I folded my arms. I'm waiting. He leaned in. Claire, do you really know who Alexander is? My stomach twisted. What are you talking about? Ethan pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. His business deals, his past, there are things that don't add up. I started looking into him, and what I found? It's dangerous. I hesitated before opening the folder. Inside were documents, photographs, and reports that made my blood run cold. Everything I thought I knew about Alexander, his rise to power, his connections, was a lie. I looked up at Ethan, my breath unsteady. Why are you showing me this? His expression was serious. Because I might have been the worst thing that ever happened to you. But he might be worse. Secrets unraveled. My hands trembled as I flipped through the documents. There were transaction records linking Alexander to offshore accounts, hidden deals with powerful but questionable figures, and even whispers of corporate sabotage. This couldn't be real. I looked up at Ethan, my mind racing. Where did you get this? He leaned back, sighing. I have my sources. After everything, I wanted to start over, to do something right for once. And when I saw how powerful Alexander was becoming, I started digging. First, I thought it was just business. But Claire, he hesitated. This goes beyond money. I clenched my jaw. You expect me to trust you? After everything? I expect you to verify it yourself, he said, his voice steady. Check the records. Follow the leads. If I'm wrong, walk away and pretend this never happened. I exhaled sharply. The old Claire might have dismissed him immediately. But I wasn't that woman anymore. That night I didn't sleep. I spent hours making calls, pulling strings, and accessing information I never thought I'd need. The deeper I dug, the more unsettling the truth became. Alexander wasn't just a businessman. He was a strategist, a master manipulator. His rise to power wasn't built on brilliance alone, but on well-placed betrayals and silent eliminations of competition. And now I was part of his world. Or worse, I was his next target. A dangerous dame. The next morning I sat in my penthouse staring at my phone. I needed to confront him. But how? If Ethan was right, Alexander was far more dangerous than I had imagined. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. Alexander, morning, mon amour. Dinner tonight? I hesitated before typing back. Yes. Let's meet at your place. I needed to see his reaction, to watch his face as I unraveled the truth. That evening I stepped into his luxurious Parisian apartment, my heart pounding. Alexander greeted me with his usual charm, pressing a soft kiss to my cheek. You look tense, he noted, pouring me a glass of wine. Long day. I swirled the wine in my glass, watching him carefully. I had an interesting conversation. Oh. His blue eyes sparkled with curiosity. With someone who knows a lot about you. For the briefest second I saw it, the flicker of recognition in his gaze. The subtle shift in his posture. But just as quickly, his expression softened into amusement. "Darling, are you investigating me?" he teased. "That's adorable." I set the glass down. "Is it true?" He tilted his head. "Is what true?" "The offshore accounts. The hidden deals. The betrayals." I held my breath. "Is any of it real?" A long silence followed. Then slowly Alexander smiled. "You always were too smart for your own good." A chill ran down my spine. "And